And feel free if you want to keep your cameras on, cameras off, up to you. I know it's a Tuesday evening, and I appreciate everyone being here. So definitely being mindful of time.
Oh,
Kiana, you are the last person that I see on my screen. Are you able to see my slides? All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Good evening, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here. I feel torn for being here today. This is not under a good circumstance, but I'm hopeful that this unfortunate circumstance will turn into something earth-shakingly good. Gandhi stated a while back that a person could shake the world gently. So allow me to do that for the rest of the evening. Won't take up too much of your time. So before we continue, I do want to acknowledge, I would like for us to have a moment of silence um, just to acknowledge Sonia Massey and the hundreds of other people who have been taken away too soon. So if you could just take 20 seconds with me to honor them, I would appreciate that.
okay.
All right, thank you all so much. I appreciate that moment of silence. So we'll go ahead and continue. So there's this quote from James Baldwin, my favorite quote from James Baldwin, that reads, "I'm not interested in anybody's guilt. Guilt is a luxury we can no longer afford. I know you didn't do it, and I didn't do it either, but I'm responsible for it because I am a man and a citizen of this country, and you are responsible for it too, for the very same reason." And I chose this quote for this evening because it captures the true essence as to why we are here this evening. Now, I want to let you all know that this isn't a me just rambling. I believe in order. So to give you a show flow, which is another name for an agenda, to let you know how tonight is going to go. So first, I'm going to start with my why, then the purpose for hashtag it could have been me. And then, you know what? I didn't even introduce myself. I'm Jessica, right? I didn't even introduce myself. I just jumped right into it. But going back to it, so I want to go over my why, want to go over the purpose, want to go over the goals for hashtag it could have been me. And then for me speaking on support, because I need you all and I can't do this by myself. So jumping right into my why, today's Tuesday. A little over 2 weeks ago, I was leaving work and I'm into, or really I call myself the queen of DEI or DBIE for diversity, belonging, inclusion, and equity. And my mom, who lives down in Florida, really understands. She's starting to understand more of what I do. And she called me and she said, Jess, did you hear about this woman named Sonia? And I shared, no, I didn't. Maybe I heard about it, but left it alone. And she said, I really need for you to pay close attention to what happened to her. Now, friends, family, colleagues, I'll be honest with you. I saw a headline weeks before Sonia's murder was nationalized. The headline was a bit vague. It said something about woman calls 911 but loses her life. And I thought, yeah, okay, that seems to happen a lot. And so I didn't bother with reading the details because I hear enough names, I hear enough stories that doesn't even make the news. So I'm like, I don't want to be traumatized by that. So when my mom said, I need you to hear about it, I said, okay, let me see what's going on. And by that time, President Biden released a statement. So I said, well, all right, well, there's a video. They're going to release the video cam. Let me see the video cam. And I saw it and I can't take it back. If you have not seen the video, you don't have to. You don't have to watch it. And when I saw it, it took me 2 days to become normal again. My stomach, it was horrible. It was horrible. And I remember saying I have to do something about this. And I was trying to figure out, why is this bothering me? I've seen enough videos. I've heard enough. Why is this bothering me? And finally, I realized it was bothering me because of it's pretty much nothing but a public lynching. And we happen to have access to it through social media. So if you take a look at the left-hand side, well, there's this photo. It's the last public lynching, public, because there's been more, right? The last public lynching that happened in the United States.
Oh, this is it.
Oh, it is it. And I don't know
Jessica,
who it is. Yep, it is me. If you could just come on mute, it's me. If you could just stay on mute for a second. Thank you so much. And I think I know who that was, so thank you so much. So the last public lynching in the US, and this was back in 1936 in Kentucky. And with this public lynching, there were between 18,000 to 20,000 people gathered to see this public lynching. So if I were to compare that to what I'm seeing now and how there's videos and how there's more killings, I think everyone became upset, wanted justice after they saw the video with George Floyd's murder. And there's been more. There's been more. So I'm sitting here as a Chief Diversity and Culture Officer delivering trainings, celebrating people, talking about racism, and seeing this happen. And I'm disgusted and something needs to change. And I'll share my story in just a second, but after seeing what happened to Sonya Massey, I said, this could have been me. Hence the birth of hashtag it could have been me. So I'd like to highlight a few stories of some of the Black women who were victims of police violence. So, of course, Sonya Massey on July 6, 2024, Sonya Massey, a 36-year-old Black woman, was shot and killed in her home by Deputy Sean Grayson of the Sangamon County Sheriff's Office in Woodside Township near Springfield, Illinois. Massey called 911 about a possible prowler. Grayson and an unidentified deputy responded and searched the vicinity. Moving inside of her home, the deputies requested her ID. Massey began searching the environment. The situation escalated quickly when Massey moved to the stove to remove a pot of boiling water that Grayson was concerned about. The unidentified officer backed away from her, and Massey said twice, "I rebuke you in the name of Jesus." Grayson threatened to shoot her in the face and drew his service pistol, and his partner did the same. And Grayson repeatedly yelled, drop the effing pot. And she did. She put it in the sink. And then she kind of crouched, or, she threw her hands up, and her last words were, "I'm sorry." She apologized. And then Grayson then shot her in the face 3 times. I do believe that the bullet entered into the left side, entering out of her eye. So in the head, ultimately killing her. 3 shots were fired. And then we have Breonna Taylor, 26 at the time. an African-American medical worker who was killed on March 13th, 2020, after police officers from Louisville Metro Police Department forced entry into her home. Taylor's boyfriend, Kenneth Walker, fired a warning shot, mistaking the police for intruders, and wounded Officer Jonathan Mattingly. Mattingly and two other LMPD officers, Brett and Miles, opened fire. But ultimately, it was Miles who was determined to have fired the fatal shot to Breonna. Breonna was shot 6 times. Maybe some unfamiliar names. Now you have Michelle Cuso. Police shot Michelle Cuso to death in her home while they were attempting to take her to a mental health facility. Cuso refused to let the police in her home, prompting Officer Percy Dupra to break through the screen door to gain entry. The officer encountered Cuso holding a hammer and shot her point blank in the chest, right in the heart. So the officer claimed that, although Michelle said nothing to threaten him, she had this anger in her face, like she was going to hit someone with the hammer. Her mother later shared that Cuso suffered from mental illness, and the reason why she had a hammer in her hand is because she was repairing her front door. Then you have Tanisha Anderson. Tanisha Anderson is on the right-hand side. The family of 37-year-old Tanisha Anderson reached out for assistance to calm their daughter during a mental health crisis. Anderson grew increasingly agitated when the police separated her from her and her family and attempted to place her in a confined space of the police vehicle. During the struggle, a police officer performed a takedown move on her, slamming her against the concrete sidewalk. He placed his knee on her back and handcuffed her as she lay face down on the pavement. The officers refused to allow Anderson's family to comfort her as she lay dying and exposed on the snow-covered street. She was pronounced dead upon arrival at the hospital. And it is reported that Anderson suffered from a bipolar disorder. And then you have 7-year-old Aiyana Jones. Detroit police officer Joseph Weekly shot and killed 7-year-old Aiyana Stanley Jones in her sleep during a raid in her grandmother's home. Weekly claimed that he pulled the trigger accidentally during a struggle with the girl's grandmother, Martella Jones. The grandmother reported that she was reaching out to protect her granddaughter, and another officer testified that there was no struggle over the weapon. So as the officers were going in to raid the grandmother's home, they threw some sort of device in there and there was smoke everywhere, and she went to go cover and get her grandchild, and police perceived that to be a threat. So the officer was tried twice, cleared of all charges, and most recently in January 2015, he returned back to work. So I mentioned hashtag it could have been me, because I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. So I mentioned it could have been me because over the past 3 years, I've had close encounters with the police. And 2 incidents come to mind, but I will focus on one of them. And with one of them, I had it was at a Black History Month event, and I was to give a speech. And right before I was going to give a speech, there was this young woman who had a seizure. Right before I spoke, and I remember saying to myself, "Oh man, please let her make it. Hope she's all right. Why wasn't we getting ready to speak?" So as they were laying her down to keep her comfortable, the promoters of the event called 911. They called for the paramedics, and automatically the police showed up. Now this is an all-black event. All-black event, just getting ready to talk about backyard resting. And paramedics arrived, and there were 4 police officers walking into the building. And I remember a couple of them saying, you know, what are you people doing? I said, oh man, already starting out calling us you people. Ouch. And the officers were like pushing people out of the way, move out of the way, move out of the way. And they approached this one woman. I'll give her the name Jackie. They approached Jackie, trying to push her out of the way. And Jackie said, no, don't put your hands on me. Don't touch me. I don't want to leave this woman just yet. I'm a nurse. And they got ready to really push her out of the way. And I stepped in, right? There's this adrenaline rush. I stepped in, and before I knew it, I went like this. I said, stop. You don't have to do this. You see how my hands are? Except for when I said, stop, please don't do this. I touched the officer. It was like, you know how you're like, wait, stop. And I touched him, and I looked at him, and I was like, oh shit. He looked at me, and I said, oh, I touched you. I'm sorry. And he said, put your hands down. He's like, it's okay. And I said, whew, okay. And who knows what could have happened with that. But this other event, very similar, except for the other event was on Juneteenth. Like, wow, I'm really starting to notice a pattern here. Black History Month, Juneteenth, except for on Juneteenth, long story short, met 3 aggressive police officers who didn't like the tone of voice, my tone of voice and someone else's tone of voice. They were using B words and other kind of nasty language. And I remember seeing all 3 of them taking their hands and putting it on their side like they were ready to discharge. Now, here's the thing. On one side, there's a gun. On the other side, it's a taser. They look very similar. I can't study them. And at one point, I remember, you know, apologizing, saying, it's okay, we don't have to do this. And I mentioned that because I remember saying, my name is Dr. Pepple, and I'm a chief diversity and culture. So I'm throwing all of my credentials. Like, see me, I'm human. I'm this individual who got common sense. Like, maybe that will cause you to simmer down. And they did. So I want to go back to sharing my like 3 incidents in a year. And it didn't have to go that way. So who's to say it could have been hashtag Jessica Pepple? Hashtag DEI. I don't know. It could have been me, right? So I want to go back to my slides and show you some commonalities that I've noticed between the 5 individuals, maybe even myself, based on the facts of the case. So bear with me while I go back to share my slides. All right, Diane, you are the last person I see. Are you able to see my slides? Perfect. Okay, let's keep it going. All right, so what do these cases have in common? Number 1, these cases reflect the legacies of Black women not being entitled to the law's protection. Rather, they are punished for seeking help. And here's another thing I also want to add. People are always quick to say something about mental illness, mental health, and I respect that. But when I'm watching videos or when I'm looking at certain cases, I'm just trying to understand why we victim, not saying we, but why are some people victim shaming? As if it's their fault, as if they are in the wrong. The Black women who were taken away too soon. Guilt by association / collateral damage. That reminds me of Breonna Taylor and Ayanna Jones. Both were sleeping. Police thought, all right, Breonna Taylor's boyfriend has drugs, or Ayanna's grandmother is up to no good. Some people may even say, well, if Breonna was sleeping somewhere else, she would still be alive. If Ayanna was sleeping somewhere else, she would still be alive. That guilt by association. Oh, and then the general unconscious bias. So pretty much with unconscious bias, just to give you a simple term with unconscious bias, it's these quick assumptions that are made. So the learned attitudes, just as the picture shows, it's these learned attitudes or stereotypes that exist in our subconscious mind. So it's, everyone has it. However, these unconscious biases, these assumptions, these stereotypes, us moving so fast, trying to process information, we seem to target, or some people seem to target, marginalized groups, Black and brown people with unconscious bias. And now I'll talk a bit more about guilt or the presumption of guilt. But let me dive a little deeper with unconscious bias, these learned stereotypes that seem to act out. They exist in our subconscious mind. So when you're looking at unconscious biases, and I'm tying it to policing, unconscious biases have been shown to affect policing in all aspects of the criminal justice system, leading to the following. Flow with me. Disproportionately high rates of police stops, searches, and violence towards young men of color. Higher rates of childhood suspension, expulsion, and arrest at school, AKA the school to prison pipeline. The disproportionate contact with the juvenile justice system. Harsher charging decisions and disadvantaged plea negotiations. A greater likelihood of being denied bail and diversion. An increased risk of wrongful convictions and unfair sentences, and higher rates of probation and parole revocation. So this is how unconscious bias shows up. So it's not just happening with an individual, or an individual has their unconscious biases, but when it begins to show up in the system, the criminal justice systems, it seems to affect more Black and brown people at disproportionate rates. And here's the reality. Without institutional and cultural safeguards, so without that protection from the law, or even the culture of the law, Black women seeking security or justice would have to create those circumstances themselves. So, they have to put it in their own hands to be safe, to be protected. So this can often lead to being on the receiving end of death or harsher judgments. So rather than some of those victims receiving treatment or receiving help, they were murdered. I spoke earlier about the presumption of guilt, which you see right here on the right-hand side is Trayvon Martin with his dad, Tracy Martin. And then below, George Zimmerman, who murdered Trayvon Martin. And I chose these two images, and believe it or not, I was a few minutes away from the location where Trayvon Martin was murdered. I was living in Florida at the time. And I mentioned that because George Zimmerman was following Trayvon Martin, saying they always get away with something. They always get away. They're always doing something to us in this neighborhood. And George Zimmerman said he felt threatened by Trayvon Martin. I think Trayvon Martin was maybe a couple of inches taller than George Zimmerman. And George Zimmerman, and being that it was the state of Florida, said he felt threatened and he stood his ground. And in one shot took the life away of Trayvon Martin. But let me throw some more stats at you, right? So here's that unconscious bias, but I'm starting to believe it's more conscious, where people know what they're doing. Black men are nearly 6 times more likely to be incarcerated than white men. Latino men are nearly 3 times as likely. Native Americans are incarcerated at more than twice the rate of white Americans. And then racial bias has contributed to the US prison population increasing from 250,000 in the early 1970s to over 2.2 million today. America has the highest rate of incarceration in the world, and communities of color, like I mentioned before, are disproportionately impacted. So I want to stop sharing my screen really quickly. I'm mindful of the people of the call, but at the same time, I am curious to hear from some folks. Has anyone had any close encounters? See, let me go back, right? Before anyone, okay, hold on, I'm trying to
I can give you a lot of examples, but
okay, wait, oh, I'm sorry, I'm not sure who is talking, and I'm trying to get my view right so I can acknowledge who's talking. Okay, I thought so. Before whoever was unmuted, if you can just give me a quick second. But what I wanted to say with this, what hashtag it could have been me. I think that what was my saving grace was my tone of voice. I often say that I code switch, that I'm able to turn off my Black vernacular or my slang, right? To sound more European in my speaking. And the fact that I was using my credentials, like I purposely did that just to say, hey, I'm this educated Black woman. I'm just as smart as you. I think that was I know that was my saving grace. But what I would like to do now is just take a few minutes, right? Because I'm mindful of time. Is there anyone who has had close calls or similar incidents with the law enforcement? I know I said you didn't have to talk, but I wanted to be mindful and open up this space. And if not, that's okay too.
Well, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
My name is Sarah Smith, and I am the pastor of People's Chelsea AME. And as a Black woman, I have had close encounters with police officers, most recently in the town that I live, which is Stoneham.
Mm.
I was traveling home one night from church, and there was a car to the left of me with two young white girls, and they seemed a little lost. I didn't know if they had been drinking or what, but they were looking to the left, and I was on their right. And instead of turning left, they turned right, hit my car, just hit my car and drove into a parking lot. And it was no big deal because I was a Black woman. So I turned into the parking lot and I called the police. And they said, was there any kind of serious personal injury? And I said, no, but I don't know if these young girls have been drinking or what, but they just made a right turn in the lane that I was traveling and hit my car. I'd like a report. So he said, okay, well, give us 5 minutes and we'll be there. I said, okay. When the police got there, they looked at me, they looked at the girls, and they immediately went to the girls and started consoling them as though I had done something wrong. And the girls were talking and they were looking and pointing at me, and the cops were agreeing. And so I said, okay, I'm going to take this up a different way because this is not going to go well tonight because it was making me angry. And, no good comes from being angry. So I went home and filed a report with the police department citing racism because that's what it was. I didn't cause the accident. My car was damaged, but that sort of, I was guilty by perception. I was guilty because I'm a Black woman. That's one. You asked for one, Dr. Pepple.
Mm,
That's the one.
mm, mm, mm. Thank you for sharing. You said, so that's the one. I'm curious without you sharing others. How many would you say?
Oh, well, I grew up in a white community and I was always the only Black. So I've had countless incidents where, as a young girl growing up, our boyfriends, my sister's uh, boyfriends, my boyfriends, they would come to visit us on the bus. And every time they walked through the community back to our house, the police would stop them. And
Mm,
finally, my dad went to the police department in Arlington and said, listen, I am a taxpayer. My daughters have friends who come to Arlington, and you are not to stop their friends.
mm,
They have done nothing to harm anyone. So my dad, I don't know how he did it, but he was effective.
mm, mm, mm,
So for me, it's happened countless times. I've been victimized, but I'm not a victim.
yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Thank you. Thank you. Sergio, I see that you have your hand raised. The floor is yours.
Hello, everybody. Sergio Vicente, Springfield, Mass. We just keep it there at least for now. But this actually happened when I was living in Holyoke. During that time, I owned it was just a 2004 Chevy Trailblazer, but it was a pretty nice one. It was black on black, had some leather interior, but for some reason, I guess the way that it looked attracted a lot of attention during that time. And I remember to this day, one time getting pulled over by a cop on my way home, and this stop was weird for the simple fact that when they pulled me over, they basically asked me, "Is everything all right?" I'm like, "Yeah." Is there a reason for why you pulled me over? Cop stood silent, took out his flashlight, flashed around my vehicle, flashed at my daughter's face, who was maybe 7 or 8 months at the time, and was trying to like look for something. And I'm like, "Is there anything wrong, officer?" And then he's looking at me. He's like, "No, you're good to go." And then he lets me go. But I'm like, why am I getting stopped in the first place? First of all, why am I not being told why I'm getting pulled over? What was the reason for it? And with that vehicle, with that same exact experience, I'd say before it got totaled, I had maybe like 3 or 4 instances that were like similar to that experience with that same exact vehicle. But yeah, it was weird.
Thank you for sharing, Sergio. I appreciate that. And always good to see you. You said that was a Chevy Blazer?
Chevy Trailblazer don't even make those
Oh,
things no
I'm
more.
okay. I just thank you. Thank you. Just wanted to kind of lighten it up a bit. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing. Before I move on to share some ideas that I have, is there anyone else? No pressure, but just wanted to be mindful. All right, Kanissa, I believe that you raised your hand. The floor is yours.
Yes. So I had one incident when I lived in Connecticut. We were in a very affluent white area. And my husband, we're always cautious about how fast we drive because in Connecticut, the tickets, they'll charge you $400 with nothing, like nothing. So my husband was driving through this very affluent area. The cops pulled us over, and the interesting thing was he looked around the car and he saw that my husband, who is African, dark skin, was sitting in the driver's seat, but he decided to come over to the passenger seat where I was, and he put his hand on his gun. And I rolled down the window because it was like really weird. and he told him that he was speeding. And I just told my husband, just like I was like pushing his hands up, put your hands on the wheel. Like it was like an automatic reaction to like being like, okay, now we have to really put all this stuff that my grandmother and everything told me about how to interact with the cops and everything. We got to do this now. But my husband, he's not from here, so he doesn't know any of this. So the long story short, the guy gave us a $300 ticket, said that we were speeding, but we were not. And my husband said, "What?" And he grabbed onto the gun like he was gonna pull it out. And I was like, no, 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 it's fine. Give us the $300 ticket. We're fine. Thank you, officer, so much. Like, have a great day. And my husband was really angry about the $300, but I was just like, that could have turned into something else, like, because you looked angry in the face, things like that. So that was like one of like the recent experiences that I had where it was like we can't even go in the area anymore. And it was just like really scary experience having interaction with a cop like that.
Oh my gosh. Thank you for sharing, Kanessa. And mm, mm. So it could have been you. Okay. All right. Yeah, I wasn't expecting these stories. Any other before I go and share my slides to present ideas moving forward? Mindful. Vanessa, when did
I
that
just
happen?
want to thank everybody for sharing what they shared, just because as a white man, I see it, but I never have seen it with this much color. And so thank you for being vulnerable and sharing, but also leaving me with something I'm gonna be thinking about for a long time. So I just wanted to say thanks to everybody for speaking up.
Thank you, Darren. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, Vanessa, really quickly, when did that happen, if you don't mind me asking?
That happened about like a year ago. Yeah, we were going to visit a friend, and yeah, we turned back around and left.
Yeah, yeah.
It only took one good time. I was like, oh, we're going home.
That's it, that's it, that's it.
To our Black neighborhood out here. We're not doing this no more.
I'm not laughing. It's just the way you said it. It's just the way you said it.
You know me.
I know, Kanissa. Gotcha, gotcha, gotcha. All right, thank you, thank you. All right, I'll go back to sharing my slides. Thank you, everyone. All right, so James Baldwin, I know I love his quotes. He states that the future is like heaven. Everyone exalts it, but no one wants to go there now. So I mention this because I have some ideas to help move this movement forward. So I'm looking at the following goals and the following / projects to help move this forward. So one being a listening tour. So those of you, you're probably wondering, well, Jessica, what's a listening tour? Very similar to what you just heard. You heard Kanissa, you heard Sergio, you heard Ms. Smith, I think I got the last name right, share their stories. So with hashtag, it could have been me. My goal with myself and hopefully a future team is for us to gather the data, gather the stories to say, hey, these are the incidents that are happening. And here's what's so wild, and that's where this is not part of my notes. I'm hearing everyone share their story, and it's so similar. Like, and we weren't even in the same city or the same town, not even in the same state. And you're telling me our stories are that similar? That's called culture. So my goal is to look at and to hear these stories, to bring about these stories nationwide. So we started here just now over Zoom with a small collective amount of folks. Can you imagine what the rest of the Black and brown populations have to say across the United States? Of hashtag, it could have been me. So I mention this because it ties into the second bullet point, partnering with law enforcement and their training institutions. I mention this because the training institutions is where that learning happens, and also where the unlearning needs to happen. But in order for that unlearning to happen, in order for those best practices, in order for that shift and that change to happen, we need these stories. We need the data, not after somebody has have lost their life, but this is beforehand if we're really trying to make that change. I'm trying to sit here and be this this bridge, this connection to say we are human. This is what we have gone through. Work with me, partner with me, because it's hard to kill somebody up close when you know their name and their story. So looking at part 3, free trainings with community members, that's us, and law enforcement, where folks are side by side. I'm having these conversations and having these trainings. Like it's just this mixed group of folks learning. So whether it's unconscious bias training, microaggressions, cultural humility, history of dehumanization, however, as long as everybody is at this table, everyone is within this room learning and unpacking together. And then finally, this hopefully we can get this going, but establishing pathways for real human connection between community members and law enforcement. Humanizing. And but more importantly, to get rid of that fear. I don't know about you. I'll speak for myself. I believe in I statements. It's something about whoop, whoop, something about seeing those lights coming behind me. I don't know about you. I will speak for myself. If my hair is in a bonnet, I shake it off. If my bag is close by, make sure my eyeliner is up to date. I make sure I throw in my earrings. So just in case they pull me, I am less of a threat. So I am going to stop sharing my screen in just a second, but I want to hear from you. I shared some of the ideas that I have, but the beauty about diversity of perspective, the beauty about diversity of thought is when I'm able to hear from everyone to see how we can make things better. And my question to you, you can put it in the chat, you can come off mute. What are some of your ideas to carry this movement forward, to build this connection, to get rid of these stories or minimize these stories, turn it around for better? Do you have any ideas? Because here's the thing, right? I'm not doing this by myself. I can't do it by myself. You know, I'm a chief diversity and culture officer, right? So that work is hard enough. It's a lot right there. So when I ask for support, when I ask for thoughts, I need the help. I mean, I have some ideas, but what do you think we need? How can we really push this forward? What do you think is needed? Mindy, I see your hand. Yes, Mindy.
Hi, Dr. Pepple. So thank you so much for all of this. This has been really great. I'm really wondering how we can tap into student alliances.
Okay.
Think about our youth, even starting as young as our middle school students, but to become integral parts of this movement. And working with different types of student organizations. We have youth that are doing some amazing things in the community,
Okay.
social justice and whatnot, and they have connections and networks that are just as wide as those that adults may have.
Yeah.
They also are brilliant users of technology to really think about how we can expand this through the tech world.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering if we put together sort of like an advisory group or whatever we would want to call it, a steering committee or something that would help organize this, but we get some youth.
Okay.
And them involved to bring their voice in, and we can start establishing partnerships with some school districts, middle schools, high schools. We have a number of educators here in this call that I think could really help establish that kind of network. But I think the youth voice is probably one of the most critical voices that could help advance this movement. I'm even wondering, like, why not partner up with a bunch of our amazing scholars and let's put together, it could have been Me Summit, right? And let's have a bunch of workshops for a day with them where they can listen. And we have a whole component for community members and adults and whatnot, but really have this be a partnership with the youth. They're the ones that are moving up and will be, you know, experiencing all of this. You shared some of those beautiful faces who have sadly, you know, their lives have been taken from them. They were children, right? So I think our youth is somewhere where is a group that we need to tap into.
Very well, very well. Thank you, Mindy. I appreciate that. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Danny, I'm not sure if your hand went up. Danny's like, no, not me. All right, Danny, I'm sorry. I thought I saw your hand go up. Forgive me, forgive me. Is there anyone else on the call? Okay, Diane, I saw you.
Hi. Oh,
Oh,
sorry.
hi. Okay. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Who is that?
Jasmine.
Oh, hey, Jasmine. Talk to me, Jasmine.
Hi, everyone. I don't know that I have a thought right now as to what we can do to galvanize the movement forward. I just want to make sure that I speak to a thought that I have and that maybe some others have also, is that sometimes when you are in the minority, whether it's racially or whether it's ethnically, the burden of responsibility shouldn't belong to us. That onus shouldn't belong to us to teach others how to be better. It's not my responsibility to teach you that Google is free, that Google Scholar is free, and that there are resources out there that can tell you how to be a better human being, that can teach people about implicit biases, that can teach us that police officers need to undergo, stricter mental health evaluations, and that really it's probably a matter of implementing mental health care professionals into the community versus more untrained, unqualified people with guns and literal licenses to kill. So I just want to make sure that I speak to that and give voice to that. Because it's a very real concern. It's a very real thought. I don't know if anybody else shares that, but while I'm tired of coming up with ideas, honestly. I just wanted to make sure that I shared that and gave life to that thought.
Thank you for giving life to that thought, Jasmine. Very great idea. Thank you, thank you. And I saw some snaps and head nods, so there were folks who were in agreement with what you were saying. Anyone else? I see some folks in the chat. So before I get to the chat, were there any folks who wanted to come off mute to speak?
I'll go after Diane.
Okay, all right. Diane and then Juanita.
So I was just going to second what Mindy said in terms of my experience with my own children and watching their ability to change the way people think about things. And I've seen it in different areas. So I think that's an amazing idea. And I think even tapping into our for me, my 20-year-olds and that group, which is very much about social justice and moving forward. And I think Mindy's got a great idea in terms of accessing both our children, and then they're the ones who are, to me, have the ear of politicians and people that are making decisions. And I mean, I'm old. People don't care what I think as much anymore. So they're really looking towards what the younger generations think. So I think the more that we can tap in to those folks and people in different positions.
Thank you for sharing, Diane. And you're not old, by the way. Just you young as you feel. Thank you, Diane, for sharing. Great ideas. I mean, the youth, they're the up and coming generation. They're the ones who are going to move us forward. Thank you, Diane. Juanita, I believe you wanted to share something.
So, I definitely want to say thank you for having this. This was, you know, awesome. And everybody that's on the call right now, I want to say thank you as well. But, you know, sitting here, hearing everybody's stories, my own stories included, like I can't take it away. I have my own horror stories, which is fine. But it's more of, what makes you so afraid of me when you're looking at me because of my color? What makes you so afraid? But me and a white person could be doing the exact same thing, and you're not afraid of what they're doing, but you're afraid of me. That is the problem. I've had interactions with younger youth kids, and it's still that entitlement. I'm better than you because my parents raised me that way. And I said this to Diane earlier today. We are a part of a different type of generation. And it's very different now. So it has to start there. You can't train a child to be unracist if that's what they see their parents doing. Those same children grow up to be cops. Those same cops grow up to kill us because you're so terrified of what you think I'm going to do with you. It's collective and everybody needs to work together and try to figure it out. And I love that for us, but you can't unlearn certain things. And that is, in their lives, part of the problem. And it's sad and unfortunate. And not all cops are bad. And I'm not saying that. We have some good ones. I work with some good ones, but those bad ones outweigh the good sometimes. And that's part of the problem. And I would love to sit down and have that honest conversation, but nobody's going to look you in the face and say, I'm afraid of you when their boss is standing in the room. That is part of the issue. And it's sad because I really think the path we're on in life is not looking good with this generation, the new one that's here. And it's unfortunate because we're going backwards in a very big way. We are going very, very backwards here. We're not moving forward. So I really want this to work, and I want the workshops, and I don't want to look on TV or hear another national murder happening because that's what it is.
Yeah.
You are so afraid of me, but you want to be a part of my culture. You can't have it both ways. You can't be afraid of me when you look at me, but yet you want to be a part of the rap video and you want to be a part of the cookout on the backyard. Like you can't have it both ways. So I wanna move forward, and I'm open to help you with anything you need, but we gotta figure out a starting point.
You got it. You got it. And this is the starting point. Thank you, Juanita. I appreciate everything that you shared. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Pierre and then Natalie, then I'll go to the chat.
Hi, Jessica, and good evening, everyone. A couple of thoughts, just overall in general. So, thank you for putting this together and having everybody here. And I'm happy that the numbers are good in terms of everybody here because we are here for you, and also because that we do care. In the stories, and to your point, no, I don't wear makeup, but I do a lot of my own. So when I am going into predominantly white spaces, so that I'm not a threat. So that's automatic, and that's my own internal oppression I have going on. And I just, to avoid all of any of these things, even though still I have my own stories, which I'd be able to go on here forever, things still do happen. In terms of thinking, like what else could be done, and I'll say this is a great start in terms of like raising awareness, and at the same time, it is small. I think in terms of next steps, I think Sarah was saying, the story about what happened in her own hometown when she was growing up, where that was an issue of a Black family in, I don't know if it was Arlington, but I'll use that. But that was a problem of a Black family in Arlington. And these things that are happening are the stories of Black people in these towns, right? So when I say awareness, one of the things that I'm thinking about is not letting these be just the problems of Black people, but letting it be the problem of the town. So like, if you're in Arlington and this is an issue, it shouldn't be like, oh, this is a Black Arlington resident problem. It should be an Arlington problem that needs to be tackled. And until that is actually the case, then we are still going to have this hashtag will go worldwide. Well, I won't say worldwide. We'll go across the United States, and the stories will be all be similar. You know, Derek spoke out earlier, saying that, you know, I've heard a lot of these stories, and, you know, I just didn't hear with this piece. Diane went on and said, you know, like, hey, you know, I'm old, what can I do? And I think somebody else, might have been Mindy mentioned about, you know, talking to the youth and everything. In reality, I think that if we're able to get more white people on board, specifically, if we're able to get white males on board to say, like, listen, here I am with all the privilege, with all the entitlement, with all the benefit of doubt, I'm telling you that this is not okay. That will go way further than we think. So, and that's just a starting point that I would say. So I say all this to say this, and hear me out on this one. I'm going to say it one way, and I'm going to go into detail slightly, right? So we have a lot of affinity groups where it's usually people of color in affinity groups. I'm proposing another one of those steps could potentially be a white learning affinity group, where leaders, people who are familiar with, who are passionate about this work and really want to see a change, really get into affinity groups and talk amongst each other about, like, hey, here are the things that you're feeling and here are the things that you saw. I understand them as well. And here are some steps that I took so I can, you know, so I can deal with the situation so that I can lower my unconscious bias and get through it. So if I was to sit here and say an action step, it would be to create a white affinity group, a white learning affinity group where white people are getting together to talk to other white people about the things that are going on and how it needs to change.
Very well, very well. Thank you, Pierre. I appreciate that. Wonderful ideas. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, Natalie.
Yes, hello, Dr. Pepple and everyone online. So I really don't want to be repetitive. I think that I'm just going to be kind of repeating what Jasmine and Pierre have said. But I just want to uplift the thought that in this work, I'm sure that everybody has their own stories from wherever you come from. I'm sure that those of us of color have our own individual stories. You know, everybody has a story, but in this work, I think just to echo off of Jasmine and Pierre, is that as a white person in the United States of America, you definitely hold privilege, that when you hear these stories, although they may resonate with you, the impact, generational impact that it has for my Black children, right? For my Black and brown grandparents, it takes a different impact because of it's generational. And so it's just not to be heard and to felt, but then change it to an action step. As Pierre is saying, what do we do with white allyship, right? And I think white privilege is one of those things where, you know, sometimes people look at privilege as a bad thing, but privilege can be turned into a good thing if you use your allyship as a strategic mechanism. And so that strategic mechanism is that you use it to be a collaborator with me when I am planning things that, you know, your privilege should help open the door, and the blockades that are presented, you now just don't resonate with me through my stories and through my tears. Don't let Black tears fall on empty white hearts and white ears, but you then stand in, and where the doors are closed, you help knock them down, but then you let those Black voices uplift and carry whatever needs to be held, right? So that way, for me, as a Black and brown person living in this country, I'm not just trying to carry a torch, but you're sitting there holding my hand up because you know that the work is not just for Black and brown faces. And so the reason I use that analogy is because you have to be intentional with when white people enter spaces where they're hearing these stories, You know, I work with a lot of Black and brown students, and we hear the stories, we hear all of these things, we feel the pain, but then there's no action step after. And so a simple action step can be, even though I'm not the voice that you always see, I'm the one standing there in the gap, making sure that I use my privilege to open and knock down those doors. And I really want those white people who have that privilege to hear that, right? Because that's an important part. If I'm trying to do a march and you see that there's a blockade ahead and you know that your privilege can remove that blockade, then do that for me. And that allyship is what we need. We don't just need people to say, man, that was a sad story, even though that's lovely. You know, that's empathy is a great thing and sympathy is a great thing. But I need your sympathy and I need your empathy to turn into an action step, right? I need you to recognize that when students of color try to create a movement and white students try to create a movement, one is just like, you know, we can hardly get funding. And the other is like, oh, they get a recognition from the State House. Why is that? Why is there a difference there, right? So for some groups, things are easier to push forward, but it can be easier for all of us if we use the allyship that we have to create strategic mechanisms to, you know, fill the gap. So I just wanted to uplift that.
Very well. Thank you, Natalie. I appreciate that. Thank you for pointing out those distinctions. Truly do appreciate that. And Mindy, I see you wrote allyship is a verb. It's action. Let's go. Let's do it. Let's do it. Being mindful of time, right? You know, I said like start on time, end on time. It's 9:04. Give me a couple more minutes to wrap this up, but I wanted to make sure, is there anyone else before I just kind of pull out some of the comments from the chat? Okay. Someone wrote to me, truly, I think this training should go through the schools and for staff, clinicians, students. And once again, hearing more about how students can get involved. Mindy, you wrote, how do we engage our political leaders in this movement? How do we leverage their influence on policies, legislation, et cetera? They may also have access to funding sources that can help enhance this movement. Someone asked, are there any law enforcement reps on this call? The top brass must be part of the conversation. Definitely. So that's what's been coming up for me. Then Caroline, I see you wrote something that comes to mind with Youth Connection, getting community resource officers involved in the trainings, how to interact with and connect with students of color. Oh man. And actively listen to what they have to say about their relationship with police officers, that school to prison pipeline. I've seen a 6-year-old be placed in handcuffs. I think my time in education, seeing that to now being in this equity work, seeing the adults, and it's just like, I can see it clear as day. So to close things out, I just only have 2 more slides I wanted to share. And all these notes, I'm glad I'm recording this because I've been trying to write fast and get things going with that. But what I also wanted to share with support, I do have my consulting and management called Equitas. If you have any ideas that you would like to share with me, please take a look at my website. Please email me at jpeppel1@bu.edu. Maybe when you go to sleep tonight, some ideas may come up. A lot of you have my cell phone number, so feel free to text me. Once again, feel free to email me if additional thoughts come up. Or maybe even when you go to work tomorrow and you notice certain things, like feel free to reach out to me, what comes to mind for that. But here's also another thing that I'm coming up with for you to consider. Oh, look at that. That's my last slide. Another thing for you to consider. I mentioned that, and a lot of you have echoed, I can't do this by myself. Like I need a team, I need people. And so here's what I'm envisioning. I'm envisioning support, I'm envisioning awareness. So as for the awareness piece, I heard something about social media. That's something. Well, what if there were t-shirts, right? What if there were wristbands? What if there was some kind of merchandise? Like what would that look like? You don't have to tell me tonight. You can text me or you can email me. But if we wanted to get something on print, to help bring this awareness. Like you see the orange. So orange is the theme color, and I have on my orange, and I chose a dark orange. I call it like a burnt orange, and it's the two colors of dark brown and orange. Orange represents life and optimism. So when you mix in that color brown, you get this darker color orange. So that's the theme color for this. But I mentioned this as to ask you all, like, what could that look like? And then finally, looking at the people piece. Can you help me? Maybe you have access. Some of you shared before the call. Hey, Jessica, I have access. This is who I know. This is what I can do. Okay, great. Maybe you're good at, I don't know, the social media content. Maybe you're good at fundraising ideas. I don't know, or maybe you're good at even facilitating conversations or trainings. Like, this is not a thing for Jessica. This is all of us and more. Pierre, you mentioned nationwide. Let's go nationwide, but it can't be one person. It can't be 10 people. It has to be more than that. So I'm not asking, how can you help me? I'm asking, please help me. And let me know what are some of the different ways that you can help me. Because it took me 3 days to like call and text people, flyers. And to me, that felt like a full-time job. And that was a lot. And then to repeat the story. That was a little bit of traumatizing. But anyways, I say all that to say, I need you. I need your help. I need the allyship. I need the talking. If you want to donate money, because I mentioned free conversations. I mentioned getting people in the room together. Well, that costs money. Facilitators cost. Feeding people, bringing people together. Maybe you know some funding sources, but I need your help. It is now 9:09. And I want to say thank you so much for your time. Those of you on the call, I will send a thank you email tomorrow, and I will also type up some notes, and I will be happy to share this video, this link with you all, to share the great news, to share the great information that came from these conversations. But this is step 1. Please help me to get to step 2, 3, 4, 5, not just me, but everyone on this call. So with that being said, 10 minutes over, forgive me, love you all. Appreciate you all. Have an awesome night. More to come. Thank you all so much. See you soon. Thank you. Love y'all. Appreciate you. Thank you for your time. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you. And I'm on here for a few minutes. Oh, let me press stop recording. Stop.